my name is Matildis. I've taught this class several times, but I've never done it as a hybrid before, which is why we keep having tech issues. I am sorry for that, but we'll get you started here soon. So the main thing that you need to know about this class is that you can do it. So in the 1480s, there was no Zoom, and we're all very grateful. What people think of when they think of manuscript arts is a bunch of monks in monasteries working very slowly and painstakingly and creating beautiful works of art. And they did up to a point. When we get to about the 1200s, we get the invention of the university. And then we get a demand for textbooks. And then we get higher literacy rates. And then we get a demand for prayer books. And suddenly monasteries have no way to keep up. So we get secular bookshops that crank out books. There's a whole separate thing about textbooks that I could go into called the PESIA system, where you rented a section of textbook, copied it yourself, returned it, and then rented the next section. And as a student, that was great. By the end of the school year, you had your very own copy of the textbook, which, given that you were probably studying law or theology or medicine, was that was important. However, looking at religious books, decorated books, bestiaries, books of hours, things like that, a lot of times those were private commissions, but by the time the books of hours became popular, they were also being cranked out as stock. People would have them prepared ahead of time. They traced different images, and they like baby Jesus in the manger. They would just crank out baby Jesus in the manger, and they weren't like individualized works of art. They were all baby Jesus in the manger. We're not going to be focusing on miniatures in this class either, but what they did do for the borders, that's what we are focusing on, was quick and dirty. They needed to be beautiful, but they needed to be fast and easy to produce. This looks, oh, I can't smell that. It's lovely. Even better. No, you're fine. You're fine.
This will test in sometimes.
It is. It is a mess. I'm accustomed, like I said, to teaching this in person, and it is a popular class, as you can see. It really is as easy as doodling. I have a number of students who come in and insist that they cannot draw, and I'm like, don't worry, we got you covered. I had someone who insisted she'd never done Scribble in her life, but wanted to make pieces as thank yous for two people who were important to her. And she sat in on my class as the very first thing that she learned, and she goes, this was amazing, this was fantastic. I was able to learn what I needed to do to make the thank yous. I was like, oh. So that was lovely. We are going to work on an artist trading card. We're going to eventually decorate the bejesus out of this, and it's going to be completely covered, and you'll be able to take it home with you. You don't need your pencil yet. I need a hand. That's what I need. So I was discussing the quick and dirty for manuscript art. A lot of these flowers are barely a step above doodling, and I'm not even exaggerating. We'll be able to see that when we go through the source materials that I have in the handout. We're going to be focusing primarily on Flemish and French manuscripts, specifically from the Walters Museum, because that's where I decided to go the day that I created the handout. We're not going to be focusing on acanthus leaves. I'll show you what they are in the images in the handout, but as soon as I show them to you, you'll see why we're not focusing on them. You could do a separate class just on acanthus leaves. They varied by time and place. You can pinpoint where a manuscript is from and when a manuscript is from by what those leaves look like. But the flowers were pretty universal because doodling is pretty universal. Let's go ahead and switch to page 2. It is the last black and white page in the entire handout, I promise you. Ridiculously easy border elements is the table. I made up the names for all of these. They are not scholarly in any sense unless you count me as a scholar, which if you do, hey, cool, nice. X flowers are shaped like X's. O flowers start as ovals that you fill in. They end up looking kind of like carnations or zinnias or marigolds or like that. VW or chicken foot, those are named the way they are depending on how you start to draw it. By the time you paint them, they end up looking identical. But they're like tulips. They have a W at the top and either a V to make them like a pointy trumpet flower or a U to make them more like a tulip. Lobed flowers you did in kindergarten. Make a circle in the middle and go around and around and around and around and around until you have a flower. You could square off the lobes to make them look a little more naturalistic for certain types of flower, like periwinkle has squared off lobes, but you don't have to. Fan flowers are a special thing that you'll see in the pictures. I love pointing them out because they're a lot of fun and they're very easy to draw. They look a little bit like thistles or like a sideways daisy when they're done. They have very thin, fine petals, but you don't have to draw the petals individually. That's what makes them famous. It's very nice. I tend not to focus on leaves very much in this class because we start having so much fun doing flowers that we just roll with that. But you can make different shapes of leaves as the table shows. We tend to focus on teardrops or ovals in this class because, like I said, we get going on flowers and then step 2 is leaves and we go, oh yeah, leaves. And we just, whatever. Fruit and other bits. When you're doing a really complicated border or a complicated looking border, it's a lot of fun to hide stuff in and among the branches and flowers and leaves. And I'll show you how to do that. You can have larger elements like the acanthus leaves, critters, birds, oddball things that don't exist in nature but are fun to draw anyway. Like it looks vaguely like a goose, but it has a dog's head, and I'm not sure where it came from, but it looks cool. Fruit and other bits it's not really a leaf, it's not really a flower, but it's something natural and it goes on a stem, so whatever. And then filler. The filler is what really makes this piece look cool. The way that it works, you do something really, really simple. And then when you're done, step 2 is another thing that's really, really simple. And step 3 is another thing that's really, really simple. And you work your way up, and by the time you're done, it looks incredibly complex. But every step was doodling. And if you can just be patient while you doodle and fill in largest to smallest, you can end up with some really gorgeous, gorgeous work. Moving on from the table, underneath that, ridiculously easy border design. Step 1, or most important rule, let the exemplar be your guide. If you're making a piece, if you're doing scribal work, for those of you for whom it is your first event, yep, hi. We have a whole thing in the SCA where we make award certificates and thank yous that look like manuscript pages. We're not going to go, so-and-so was a volunteer for 20 hours and we're really grateful. Here's the printed off thing from the computer. No, we're going to find somebody who is a nerd and an artist like myself, and we're going to nerd out and get artsy and create your award certificate from scratch and then give it to you. And then you have a frameable piece of art that says, thank you for volunteering for 20 hours. Sometimes in Latin, honestly, yes. If you're doing scribal, it's really great to find a medieval piece and use it as a guide. You don't have to slavishly imitate every last step, although you can, and those look cool. You can also use them as inspiration. I personally tend to shy away from modern representations in my art, but there are people who do them and they look cool, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I'm not going to tell you that you should or should not pursue what makes you happy, artistically speaking and creatively speaking. So let the exemplar be your guide is the way I operate. And it's the way most people operate when they're creating a piece, but don't feel like that is a have to or you suck. We don't do that. We're going to pencil our elements in first, working largest to smallest, and I will show you how to do that momentarily. You break it into sections if the exemplar calls for it, and I'll have pictures that show you that. You do the acanthus leaves because they tend to take up a lot of space. You do the birds and animals and people because they take up large amounts of space, but not as big as acanthus leaves. Then you do the vines and stems. Then you put flowers on them. Then you put leaves on them. Then you put tendrils on them. Then you fill in any gaps that are left. You work your way largest to smallest and you fill in. A metaphor I like to use is taking a big jar, you fill it full of rocks, and then you fill it full of pebbles, and then you fill it full of sand, and then you fill it full of water. If you start with the sand, you're not going to have any room for your rocks. So always go biggest to smallest. Depending on how the leaves and flowers work, there are 2 different ways to draw them, depending on their shape. I call it skeleton and outline. We'll cover that. Don't worry about it. Gilding is a step that we're not going to get into today. That's working with gold leaf. When you're working with gold leaf, you always want to put it down before you put paint down because gold will stick to paint and ruin your work, and it's annoying. Sparkly, but annoying. Color, outline, background fillers, and then an also very important step back to admire your work. This is meant to be fun. If you're not having fun, don't do it. I know so many scribes, and it makes me sad, who talk about how much they hate their work, or they are unhappy with it and they tear it up. And I'm like, no, please don't. I've been doing this for about 20 years, and I've never had to destroy a piece. Granted, I've never had a disaster like a tipped bottle of ink. You know, sometimes it happens. But usually if you make a mistake or an error or you're not happy with it for some reason, you can fix it. So we're gonna not destroy our work, and we're not gonna stop halfway through and go, this sucks, because there's always an awkward stage about halfway through where you go, I don't know about this. But as you finish it, it gets better. Let's turn the page. These are all pulled from borders in manuscripts from about the 1460s to 1480s. I have shapes here that I can talk about. You can see what I'm getting at. The X flowers, the O flowers, how they work. I will teach you how to doodle them on the back of my card here. An X flower. Is that overexposed? Let me see my writing. Oh, you did. Okay, good. You make an X. Your stem comes off of it. Huzzah, it's a flower. When you paint these, it's easier to show this than it is to draw it. You do a paint stroke and another paint stroke and another paint stroke. And what that ends up looking like is this. And you've got a circle in the middle, and you just go like that. When you are drawing your guidelines for where you're going to paint, you don't have to draw it fancy like that. You just draw an X. When it's time to paint it, you'll paint over that, and you'll be able to see how it works. O flowers. O's are fun. Make an O. Make another O. That's the center of your flower. Now, these are a lot like lobed flowers. I'll get back to this in a second. A lobed flower is a circle, and then you go around and around and around and around. Or you can go 5, or you can go 6, or whatever. For the O flowers, you stretch out those lobes. See how they're very oval. And then you go around and you do it again. And you fill in, and you fill in, and your stem is going to be somewhere in there. These are usually either pink or red with a gold center. I'm going to color in my gold center here. And then if they are done in pink, you do the lines in red. If they're done in red, you do the lines in gold, and they're all shiny and sparkly, and they look really cool. That is an O flower. These are lobed flowers. You can do that, you can do that, you can do that. You make them fancy. You can add spikes that come off of them like that. There are variations. Fan flowers, so called because your stem comes up and out and like that. This is going to be green. This is where your stem comes in. You'll take, these are almost always in white. I was very surprised to find an example in yellow in one of the manuscripts I was researching. But they're almost always white, and then you do a pink line here, and a pink line here. And then you go zip, 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 and you have pink line. But you see what I'm getting at? These really are doodle flowers. They're very, very easy. UV or UW or VW flowers. Here's a V. Here's a W. There's your stem. You are done. Here's a U. Here's a W. There's your stem. You are done. Yeah, this is how this works. Absolutely. And if you can do that and space them consistently and fill in, say, 2 different kinds of flowers that balance each other nicely, and then put in the leaves and then put in the squiggles and then put in, whatever other extra color, you can create really complex looking works. On the handout, on this first page, page 3, I've got W leaves and T leaves on the bottom right image. Let me bring this in here. Here's a W leaf, W, right? Or like a chicken foot. Here's a T right here. Where the stems split, they have some ovals here. Here's another oval where the stem splits off. These are mostly O flowers in here, but if you look at this, this is an oval here with bristles coming out of it. This is an oval with some petals on it and some bristles coming out of it. These are so simple. Let's turn to page 4. So earlier I was talking about acanthus leaves, and I was talking about dividing your area into sections before you start if you're operating largest to smallest. That first one labeled lobed flowers. The purple and the red are lobed flowers. They're painted on gold sections, which are decorated with something called shell gold, which I could get into, but I'm not going to. The big, huge, these guys are stylized acanthus leaves. The stylized acanthus leaves are, acanthus is actually a shrub that has these big, huge, twisty, bendy leaves, and they look cool. And they get used in architecture, and they get used in art a lot in Europe. They get thinner and more wispy and more abstract as the time period goes on. German early period, by early, I mean like 13 to early 1400s, are very broad, naturalistic looking leaves. By the time we're to the 1480s, they're swirls. They're just swirls. That middle stripe has fan flowers and a couple lobed flowers, and there's a strawberry at the bottom. Strawberries are easy too. Make kind of like teardrop, or not a teardrop, like a pointy, like a heart. Strawberry. And then when you're painting, you put little bristles on it to make them hairy. You paint this red and you do those gold, and it looks nifty. You make your cap green. You got a strawberry. Page 5. That middle one has some fan flowers at the top, some weird fruit things, some funky lobe flowers in the blue purple towards the bottom, and then an O flower in red at the very bottom. On the right, that top diamond there has purple and white lobed flowers that look like violets. And they're lobed flowers. They're super easy to draw. It's just how you color them that changes what they look like. And then VW or chicken foot flowers in blue at the bottom. And you see those acanthus leaves again, looking very swirly and nifty. They're nice. We're not going to focus on those so much. Page are we on now? Thank you. I start moving to half pages and bottom larger things because I wanted you to see how these all go. There's a very realistic looking columbine right here. This is basically a lobed flower with some curlicues coming off the back of it. You could do it as a fan flower, but since it's got that lobed shape, like here, 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 I would do it personally as a stretched out, like I would do, or even a UW, like a U here, and then a bunch of W, and then just some curls off the end. Page 7 are 2 half pages. The top has no acanthus leaves and the bottom has a really big one. But if you look at the flowers, they're all very straightforward and simple. The top is a really good example of tendrils and squiggles. Those are fill-ins. Like instead of using leaves, he used squiggles a lot, almost exclusively. There are some gold leaves, but he emphasized squiggles because he didn't want to use a ton of gold. They. Contrary to popular belief, they were absolutely women artists in the Middle Ages. Husband-wife teams running scriptoriums and making books together, like one of them would write and the other one would paint. That's a whole separate thing. Page 8 and 9, we have more half pages and a whole page. Page 8 has those yellow fan flowers. Aren't those cool? The yellow and rust instead of white and pink. Now there's a different way to make fan flowers. There's 2 ways to make fan flowers. The one is this one here that I showed you, right? Another way to do it is you make your fan and you put an oval up here so that you can see down inside the flower. And you go around here and around the top, and you just fill in like that. And if you want, you can have flower bits, stamens, I think they're called, coming out of the middle. And you fill that in, and that's green, and it's very fancy. You can make them cup shaped. If you notice, the yellow ones are more rounded rather than pointy, but they're still basically a fan flower or a cup flower, I guess you could call it. Let's look at pages 10 and 11. Full page, but you see how they fit together. You see how these are being composed. You've got strawberries on page 11. You've got lobed flowers. You've got the acanthus leaves again. 12 is an interesting layout. If you're in a hurry to make an award certificate, a scroll for the SCA, you don't have to do a full border. You can just do a left border or a right border, and as long as your calligraphy is nice, it's going to set it off very, just beautifully, and you're good to go. Page 13 is a very weird, it's not weird itself. It's a 2-page spread, but the pictures were taken as a left page and a right page and then spliced together, so that's why the middle looks so strange. But you've got a miniature there, you've got a capital, you've got some fan flowers. Oh, those are yellow too, how cool. Some yellow fan flowers, some strawberries. On the left side, you've got O flowers and X flowers a lot, and fan flowers. Are you able to see where I'm pointing these out? This is making sense so far? Okay, cool. And then page 14 is kind of like ridiculous. This is the Hours of Galeazzo Marietta Sforza. It's one of 7 surviving Black manuscripts. They're amazing. I like them a lot. I wanted to include a page here because even though it's in Black and done in gold and silver because they were filthy rich when they commissioned this, it's still the same basic principles. You fill in largest to smallest. You do your acanthus leaves and your critters. Then you do your flowers and fruit and whatever. Then you do your leaves, then you do your tendrils, and if you look, I'm going to come in here on the projector. In between the leaves are these dots with squiggles coming off of them. Here's one, and here's one, here's one. Up here along the margin is one. I'm going to try something real quick. No, that's not any better. Okay. I was thinking that it's very bright, and I wanted to see if I could dim this, but with the light on or off isn't making a difference. Those are called starbursts, or they also can be called squash spiders because you draw a body, and then you draw the legs coming off of it. Starburst is probably the nicer thing to call it, but if you're feeling especially mean about spiders today, you can call them squash spiders. It's fine. If you look at the top of the page, you've got grapes here. You got a bunch of grapes. These are a variation on lobed flowers right here. I don't know how well you can see that. It's a 4-petaled lobed flower with a bulb behind it, and then the stem comes off of the bulb. Does that see how those go? Okay, cool. We are going to take our cards. We're going to have a slight discussion on what flowers we want to use most today. I often go with X's flowers and O flowers. But I'm not married to it. You know, if anybody here has a particular pair of flowers they want to play with, we can either all do them together, or you can just pick 2 flowers and roll with it, whatever you feel like. Go ahead and take a minute, flip through. Oh, almost forgot. So the black page on the back is a really great layout for SCA scroll purposes, because you've got a space on the right, that big roundel, where you can put the award badge or the person's arms or whatever. And then the roundel at the bottom is where you can put the kingdom seal. You can also do a roundel or something up at the top with you can do like their personal arms up top, the badge of the award on the side, the kingdom seal on the bottom, and it's all nice and symmetrical. And you've broken your border up into sections. You're not having to do all of this as one big section. You can do parts at a time, which is very helpful. Does anybody have any questions so far? Is this making sense for people?
I was just curious. Like,
Yes.
Do you normally do the calligraphy first?
I do.
Around it?
Yes.
Or is it matter?
In period, typically the calligraphy was done first, because the whole point was that this was a book that you were going to read, and if you didn't get the rest of it finished, you still at least had text.
Right.
Whereas if the decoration was done first, and then you ran out of time before your client demanded the book, you kind of hose it.
Right.
Whereas if the text is done, they at least have something that they can read.
But I do it the other way.
Right, and in the
It
SCA,
takes me longer to do the art.
Mhm.
I have a harder time doing the art than doing the calligraphy, so I do the hard part first.
There's different logic for different scribes and how they approach it in the SCA especially. And I learned that it's not actually set in stone that the calligraphy was always done first. Sometimes they did the decoration, you had to try and make the text line up to where they said capital goes here, and you went, oh, okay. Some people feel the calligraphy is harder or more difficult to correct, so they do that first, because if they mess it up, they haven't ruined an art piece. The art tends to be easier to correct, for me at least. It does take me longer as well. I can do the calligraphy in about an hour and a half for a typical scroll, and then anywhere between 3 hours and several days for the illumination, depending on what I'm doing. But yeah, different approaches. There's not a right or wrong way there. There's not even a, well, this way is more authentic, because we're learning bit by bit that they had different approaches as well. It wasn't set in stone. Yes.
I think somebody asked for the black or something was done. Actually, was given a scroll last week, which was done on black. It's not as handsome, but it is done.
It's absolutely, yeah. I have seen carved wood and carved stone, and somebody sculpted a Viking longship out of clay and did runes in clay around the outside of the ship, and did their arms on the sail of the ship, and in the clay Viking longship. People do all kinds of insane things to make award certificates in this society. It's fun though, because we're nerds. We're artsy nerds. So I'm gonna flip my card over. We're mostly gonna be done with the handout here, unless you want to pick a pair of flowers. This is up to you. I think I'm going to go with lobed flowers because I don't do them very often. And cup flowers because I almost never do those. If you want to do X's and O's, those two balance really nicely because one of them is sort of square and spiky and the other one is round. And they look nice. You're going to take your pencil.
Yep.
Oh, you don't have a pencil in your kit? Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, the cup would be the pencil will be kind of hard to negotiate.
You have another mechanical pencil.
I have one kit left. Funny, both of my classes I set up to record and do Zoom hybrid, and in both classes we haven't had any Zoom attendees other than ourselves.
We have an attendee.
Really? Who?
Enchantadora.
Oh, I thought that was you. I apologize, Enchantadora. Nice to see you, or not see you, as the case may be. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna skip the critters. We're gonna skip the acanthus leaves. We're just gonna focus on the ridiculously easy flowers because that is what this class is called. Still operating largest to smallest. We're gonna do 2 stems. Depending on your time period, sometimes you only have 1 stem and they swirled back and forth and they didn't cross and they didn't touch and you had spirals and it looked really nice, but they didn't cross. The first time I started working on those black scrolls, I freaked out because the stems crossed and touched each other. Like, what are they doing? Yeah, this is complicated and hard and I'm scared. I got over it. Let's do a kind of curvy spiral, a big one, kind of like that on your card. If you can see that okay. And then, because we can, we'll start in the opposite corner and we'll just do a nice curve. Don't make it too straight. Anybody who says they can't draw a straight line, this is your moment. You just do kind of a curve. So we've got 2 stems. What did I say I was going to do? Lobed flowers and cup flowers. Okay, cool. Coming off of my curve, whatever you have, call them flower A and flower B. On one stem, you're going to do flower A, and on the other stem, you're going to do flower B. You want to space them out fairly evenly. About like that is where I'm going to put my flowers. I'm going to put another one down here. Do one right there. You see where they're sticky off of the stem? I mean, is that visible?
They have to just be on the outside of it.
They don't have to be, no. But remember, you've got another stem cutting through there, and you want to leave room for those flowers as well. I'm going to do a circle, and 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to put spikes on mine because I feel like it. And if you screw up and go from a 4-lobe to a 5-lobe because you weren't paying attention, that's period. Go with it. Also, at the end of this class, we're going to have a group portrait. No faces will be used, but we're going to take all of our cards and put them together on the table and take a big picture. And then you can have your cards back and take them with.
So all of the flowers you're doing are the same.
On stem A, I am doing flower A.
Oh, okay.
On stem B, I am doing flower B. First time I taught this class, I remember freaking out because it was so quiet, and then I realized, no, everyone is painting and not talking, and that's okay. I'm one of those who, when I get nervous, I talk more, and I'm like, why is it so quiet? Oh God. And I got scared, but I got over it. Let me see. Stem B, I'm going to do my next, I'm going to do cup flowers. I should probably add these to the handout, honestly. Cup flowers, because they're not quite UV, or I mean UW or VW, but they're very close. And they're not quite fan flowers either. They're not quite O flowers, but they look nice and they make me happy. I'm working a little hard on these. Don't feel like they have to be perfect. Remember, we're doodling. And if you were a period scribe, you were crunched for time. You were not being slow and precise with these. The layout was the most important thing. Now I notice I have a big empty space up here on my card. Y'all see this right here? Mm-hmm. I'm going to branch off of the stem. I'll probably put a little node right there. And I'll put another flower in that empty space because I have room for it. Probably going to see some areas that are still a little open and you're not sure what to fill it with. We'll get to that in a second. Remember my metaphor of taking a big jar and filling it with rocks? These are the rocks. We're going to go to pebbles next, and then we're going to go to sand. And some of those things we're not going to bother even drawing. We'll just paint them in. But they'll be, you'll see. So the two of you who are not sitting at a table, do you have something that you can paint on? You do. Fantastic.
As long as you don't mind the boxes coming with it.
Are you kidding? I bought them at the dollar store. No, they were literally $1 each. I was thinking I have this cardboard box in the wagon and I can find a way to maybe set it up as a table, but I don't
I'll think that's here.
There's also the little dry erase board that can go back there. Would that work or no? If you don't want it, it's okay.
I think I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, never mind. This is so much easier once we get the tech to work. I have the dry erase board for when I don't have a projector. I just draw the leaves of the flowers and I erase things, and it's a lot of fun. When you are ready, do I have all the paint out of there? We're going to, actually, sorry, I'm skipping a step, my bad. I'm going to just stick with oval leaves on here, and we're going to start filling in empty spaces. They can go on either side of your stem. And you see how they start filling in empty spaces that you have? Yes. Yes.
That's how I like to do my leaves.
Go for it.
Is that
Yeah.
okay?
It's an earlier period design, but there's nothing wrong with it.
It's a diamond shape.
There are probably diamond-shaped leaves in there. I know that I tend to see things like that in about the 1300s, and these are late 14s, so they're a little more naturalistic. But again, if that's how you like to do it, then do it.
And they should be just free floating.
They should be attached to the stem because they are leaves, and this is a stem with flowers on it. We'll get to free floating stuff here before too much longer. There will be tendrils and squiggles and things that come off of your stem. We'll probably go back and use the pencil for those later, or we might use the green, we'll see. But because they're small, I'm not going to fret over them at this stage. And then fillers that are free floating, that's a really good word, I'm going to have to remember that. Will go in like up here on my card. I'll probably put a starburst. You know, a circle here with some rays that come off of it. Might put one down here, free floating. Again, they don't touch anything. Might put one right here. You get the idea, right? Oh. I should move this and put it back in the window where it belongs. There we go. Is everybody about ready for the next step? Cool. I'm going to pause briefly. Apparently there is anonymous teacher surveys that you can fill out, and there's a QR code here on the table buried underneath the candy. The candy is for anybody who wants it. The teacher survey is for anybody who wants it. Just use your device to copy that. I think I have some. We should have at least two. Some forms for people who don't have devices that do QR codes too. That's been your commercial for the day. So when it comes time to paint, the first time I taught this, I forgot to tell people how to get the paint wet. And somebody was pouring water out of their cup into the paint dish. They didn't know, they'd never done it before. They used way too much water. It took a really long time for the paint to dry. It was a disaster. What you do, you collect a couple drops of water on your paintbrush and you just drip it in onto the paint.
What kind of brush should we be using?
Don't care.
Should we start with the stems?
I'm going to start with the flowers, actually, because they're bigger. And by the time we do the leaves, we'll be doing the stems as well, and we'll be doing the tendrils. And if you look at your period examples, some of the stems weren't painted, they were inked. So you could just leave them pencil if you wanted. Since we don't have an ink pen with us today, we're substituting the part of the ink pen will be played by the number 2 pencil. I'm doing red first. Feel free to do the blue first, or even the white if you're doing fan flowers by any chance. We're just dripping water into our paint dish. When we have enough, we just brush the paint and it's already wet, and now we have paint on our brush and it's lovely. These are an opaque watercolor called gouache. They're made by Winsor Newton. Yeah, these are Winsor Newton. So they're really good quality paints. You definitely get what you pay for. Okay. I decided I'm going to do the spikes in red and the flowers in blue because I feel like it. Again, there's not a wrong or right here. Don't feel like you have to imitate me in that regard. The nice thing about this is you can control how much water gets into your paint by using just a drop at a time. It will absorb in and your paint will get thicker and drier. You just add another couple drops of water. But when you're done, the paint will dry in the dish very quickly and you can put it away easily without having puddles to clean up after. It is a method I like a lot because I also control my paint consistency and it behaves a little better. Does anybody have a clock handy right now? Oh, wait.
I have a clock handy.
3:06. Oh, look at that. It is. I didn't see that when I walked in. Feel free to use a tiny brush if you want very precise strokes. However, and I have a soapbox on this, a tiny brush is not necessarily the best brush. A pointy brush is the best brush. If you operate with a larger brush, you can hold more paint and do more with it before you have to reload. If it has a fine point on it, you have a lot of control over your brush strokes and a lot of precision, and you can make it look really nice. Is everything going well for people so far? Well, well-ish. If you like, I can come over and assist you or troubleshoot with you. Yes? Okay. That's okay. Add more. You can take your pencil and add, like you can go across here and spread out like a fork coming off of the add a flower here. This, as it comes around, you can add a flower to the end of the stem. That would fill that space there. It is pretty common, I notice, especially with folks who've never done this before, they're being cautious, and so they make smaller flowers. Nothing wrong with that. It also is endlessly fascinating to me that you can take 12 different people, and even if we dictate that we're all going to do the same types of flowers, they will all turn out different. I will get 12 very distinct, individualized cards. They're like fingerprints, and I love it. So don't feel like whatever you're doing is not right just because it doesn't match what your neighbors are doing. Yes. Yes, like a red flower, and then maybe a gold center. Good one. I don't really have a lot in the way of paper towel, but this is watercolor and water-based color. If you need to, you can brush on your paint, but you don't usually have to. Just rinse it, it'll be fine. These kits have been used by quite a few people. Some of them probably have a little bit of color mixed into the white where people were making pink or light blue. Some of them have made purple because I felt like it. So the colors may not be completely pure in your kit, but that's okay. You had a question? Do these just work the same way? They work exactly the same. The gold and the silver are a different brand of paint. They're mica based, and they're gorgeously shiny. They're great. I love working with them.
And for these flowers, do the center need to be a different color than the petals? I think I have some.
For the lobed flowers, I'm going to do gold centers, yeah. It doesn't matter. Some people insist that you need to do the gold paint last. You would do gold, right, you would do gold leaf first. You would do gold paint last because you don't want the sparkles to contaminate your non-metallic colors. I don't find that that's necessarily a problem if you're rinsing your brush well. So don't panic over it. There we go. That's a pretty nice. So I want to show you how I'm doing these cup flowers. I don't know how well you can see it because of the brightness of the camera. I've mixed a tiny, tiny bit of pink. And I'm not even trying very hard to fill that in. That's like a straight line. And I'm just sort of warping with it. And then flick, 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 flick. And now it's a whole bunch of little petals. Hello. Let me see. Ah, here. Oh, that's another way to do it. Do a curly little dot and then a flick. Dot, flick, dot, flick, flick.
Yeah, I forgot to put the lines on these.
So I worked with red first. I'm about to switch to blue. If you we're working with blue first, feel free to switch to red. Sometimes people will do every individual flower and then move on to the next. I like to work with individual colors and do everything in red first and then everything in blue, or vice versa. It's just, I'm rinsing my brush less often. That way, I do all the blue and then I rinse my brush out and then I start all the red, for example. But it's not a requirement. Like, don't feel like you have to do it that way. It's just, it does seem a little more efficient to me, so that's why I do it that way. I wish I had a little more space. I would come around and look over everybody's shoulder and offer in words of encouragement.
Just copying off some of those papers is really an issue.
It's not. I'm not grading anything. The whole point here, when I was a kid, everybody talked about how important it was to express yourself, but they never told me what that meant. You know, express yourself, express your own creativity. I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? Am I doing it right? I was very focused on, you know, I was possibly a tense child. What I have found, if anybody else is struggling with that question, is that expressing yourself comes as naturally as breathing. You do things your own way without even trying. You'll do these flowers, and you'll see when we put all the cards side by side, no two are alike. You're already expressing yourself. Just give yourself the freedom to have a creative outlet from time to time, and you'll be expressing yourself. And what you choose for your creative outlet will be an expression as well. You know, some people dance, some people play musical instruments, some people sculpt, some people repair vintage cars, I don't know. How's it going?
First get made, like,
Oh no!
I was told so many times as a child that I cannot draw.
Oh, that's sad.
Does anybody here have any objection to my using profanity for just a moment?
I know.
Because fuck those guys.
I know.
Fuck whoever said that. That's rude. I can't draw. Now, I mean, there are sometimes when technique is involved. For example, my husband, when it comes to singing, he is unable to match pitch. If you sing a note at him, what he sings back is not the same thing. So by that criteria, he can't sing. But that doesn't stop him. Nor should it.
Yeah.
He has a great time just belting it at concerts or in the shower or, you know, whatever. And I really admire him for that.
I think that's amazing. I teach music, and kids, like at a young age, think that they can't sing or they can't do whatever, which just makes me
That's
really
sad.
Like, you are 11. Like,
How
why
can
do
you
you think-
possibly, yeah.
When I was in junior high school, in music class, they had everybody sing a little bit. They divided your, you know, alto,
Sopranos or whatever. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I was putting, you're a listener.
Oh.
Also,
It's horrible.
And I mean, I get it if your priority is to produce a specific sound and somebody is unable to do that, that's one thing, but never, I'm a big proponent of accessibility.
In the FCA, I have found if someone doesn't care if it's perfect,
If you did it with
They don't
heart and
care.
intent and love,
if it was for your favorite person, they don't care if you think it looks crap. You saw them.
This is why I love giving baby blankets when I knit.
nice.
Because new mother hormones are amazing.
They love it. Well, and outside of the SCA, I write fic. I write fanfic. And there's what they call the two cakes theory of fic. And it applies to any other art too. You sit there and you've worked really hard and you made a cake and it's a little lopsided and the frosting's not great, but you made it and you set it on the table. And you're like, all right, I made a cake. And then along comes somebody else with like a 7-tier wedding cake and it's exotic flavors and perfect frosting. Oh, my cake is not that great. And then along comes somebody with a knife and a fork going, holy shit, 2 cakes. So yeah, your own individual expression is a beautiful thing.
What about,
I mean, I got my start in online art on literally
Nice.
and I refuse to move on to a better art program.
That's spite. The healing power of spite.
I also teach, like Matildis, I teach beginning class. Teach flowers. I don't do flowers very well.
Stop that.
I'm practiced,
There you go.
but all the people I know that I've taught, their very, very, very first scroll, got signed by the local baron or the king and got given out to the recipient.
Yep.
Because you made it. Somebody made it.
My AOA was a little girl's first scroll.
Oh,
And I love it. It's my favorite that I have.
Love that.
I'm going to take a moment now that we're all relaxing and breaking the ice here, and stop doing that, and show you what I'm doing with the green here. There's several different ways to play with green leaves. We drew ovals, right? But if I wanted to, I could make holly leaves by going flick, flick, flick. Yes? What?
No?
I have no idea.
I'm sorry. You've got 10 more minutes.
Only 10 more minutes?
Yeah.
Well, that's no. Okay, paint faster, everybody.
So what are the like dots and things you're supposed to throw in?
I will do that now. I will slap some green down and then I'll come back with my gold and I will show you the squiggles.
Scroll the thing that's not
I thought this class ran till 4.
I thought I did too.
It does run till 4. It's an hour-and-a-half class.
No, it started at
Started 2.
It does go till, anyway. That's what happens when you have fun. You lose track of all time. All right, I'm just going to finish up my green here real quick. I'm going to do the part of the ink pen was played today by a number 2 pencil. And I'm not going to do my stems in green because that'll save me a little time. I'm going to switch over to gold here momentarily to talk about squiggles, and I will also pull out my pencil for some of those. Let me pull out the pencil first, actually. Nikes. I feel really bad. I'm sorry, guys. I hate rushing people for this. We had tech problems. I talked a lot. I feel bad. All right, tendrils. I want you to watch carefully. You come off the stem and you do a little squiggle, like a loop, like a 6 or a 9. That's one type of squiggle. These are tendrils that are coming off of the stem. They are also filling space, which we want. So my white flowers there have one type of squiggle. My blue flowers are going to have a different one. I'm going to go swiggle, swiggle, flick. Swiggle, swiggle, flick. They're like cursive letter M's. M's and N's. You can also do just little apostrophes. Zip, 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 and now you have thorns. Those are especially useful on O flowers because then they look like roses. They don't have to be perfect, and in fact, if they are not perfect, they have more character, and we like that. We are big fans of character.
Then we just put dots in spaces that.
I will show you with my gold here momentarily. Let me pull up a little more water. Love working with this gold. God, I love this gold. Okay, watch carefully. Draw a circle, and then go flick, 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 flick. Draw a circle. Draw a dead spider and put legs on it. Sorry.
What was the brand of the gold?
It was originally called Fine Tech, and they've recently changed the name to Coliro, C-O-L-I-R-O. You can still find it sold as Fine Tech. It's made in Germany, though, so if you go looking for Fine Tech, sometimes you end up on the German Fine Tech website. However, obligatory Scribble plug for John Neal, bookseller. How many people have heard of John Neal? Really? You've never heard of John Neal? Oh, you're missing out. I'm very happy to be the one to introduce you to John Neal. John Neal is a small business of about 8 people, one of whose staff members is a baroness. If you want customer service or someone who understands what you're after in the SCA, there's nobody better. Also, they sell Fine Tech, aka Coliro.
We have a Dick Bliss here, right?
Oh, jealous. I order from them online.
The problem is going into the store, it's difficult.
You need a chaperone?
Someone who isn't my husband. I think the last time I was there was just 400 pounds.
See, you say that like it's a bad thing. It really depends on what your rent is that month. Not a good sound.
I didn't even buy like a table. I mean, I bought like brushes and pens.
I still am not seeing the problem here. Okay, so I'm going to rinse out my brush and put it away. If you guys are finished, go ahead and start putting stuff away. If you're not, I'm not going to keep pushing. Although we do have about 5 more minutes. So I would like to gather us all up for that group portrait here in just a moment.